for spending your lunch learning about snakes. So yeah, my name is Bryan Hughes. I do a lot of work with snakes. So the reason that I get to talk to people about experiences they have with snakes. I mean, if you're in Facebook or something, that you hear a lot of stuff. That's a lot of what the presentation I have is about. So you can answer those questions better. But the reason that I can say more, I guess, authoritatively about what a snake is going to be doing or not is because I have that happen every day of my life. Every single day of my life, there's something venomous that's striking at me. It's happened this morning. It's one of the first things that happened to me. It's a venomous snake struck at me. After I get done with this, I'm going to go to my field site and catch rattlesnakes and put them in tubes, and there'll be some striking going on. So it's just something I see a lot. So for me, when there's this rattlesnake and it's rattling, it looks very different with that amount of context than it would to someone that sees a handful of rattlesnakes each year. Each year I am around or handle or photograph several thousand snakes. Most of them are venomous. A lot of that is research. I work with the city of Phoenix and the Arizona Game and Fish Department. We are a private company, but we fund our own research. We contribute data to ASU, other organizations. Just do a lot of fun stuff with snakes. So around them all the time, have a good time. I threw this in real fast. This is my team. Portion of it in the Peruvian Amazon. This is on Friday, with the largest viper in the world. That's a baby Bushmaster. It's about 5 feet long. It'll grow to about 12 feet long. So we were super stoked about that. But that's my spiel. Say I see a lot of snakes, so that's why you should listen to me about snakes over your neighbor that sees 2 or 3 a year and has opinions about it. So Arizona is awesome for snakes. If anyone has any questions too, just throw them out, because a lot of this is, the same presentation. A lot of this just kind of changes based on who I'm talking to. But we work with snakes and people a lot. So a lot of these snakes are things that people will never see for the most part. We have 15 species here, 17 subspecies if you count all that. And in Phoenix, we have 6 species. So that means that this area, the Phoenix Valley, has more species of rattlesnake, greater diversity, and in larger numbers than any other place in the country, and a few places around the world have as many venomous snakes that live in and around a population like this. So you can compare it to a lot of places that have a lot of snakes, Florida, Texas, and like that. Phoenix puts it all to shame. There's lots and lots of snakes here of lots of different types. So South Mountain in particular, within 5 miles of South Mountain, there are more diversity of rattlesnake species than there is anywhere. That 6 species is going to drop to 5 within the next few years because of the completion of the 202. Sidewinders are going to die out in that area, so I'll change it then. So I'm not going to go through identifying a lot of snakes. That's a whole other presentation. That's a lot more, for trivia night sometime. But most people do not know much about rattlesnakes. We live here, even if you grew up here, even if you see a lot of snakes, and also people that work in places where you have a lot of information about them. I end up talking to a lot of nature center people that know a lot about snakes, but most of what people know is just what we hear from other people, which is wrong. I mean, there's a lot of information out there that makes them seem very scary. Yeah, this is Jill. She works with us, and that's her daughter that hates everything. So we have a lot of snakes here, and we also have a lot of people, and a lot of the people that are here are from other places. So there's this air of fear about these animals, and it actually drives some people away. There are people that move because of it. My first emails I was working on this morning was a guy that's moving here from somewhere, and he was asking which neighborhoods have snakes and which ones don't. It's a reason why someone will move to a community or not. It's a big thing. We have a realtor that works with us, and she actually does snake removals, and she found that some people, like someone moving here from Canada, she's able to actually make or break a sale based on how well she can address that question about snakes and do so truthfully and calm the fear about what it is. So it is a big deal to a lot of homeowners here, and that's primarily who we work with. So why is it so dramatic, and why are we so scared of snakes? So is anyone here really scared of snakes? Like, would you have a problem if I had any snakes? Everyone's pretty good with it?
I don't like snakes.
Yeah, most people kind of have like a dislike of it. And if you were to really examine it, like if there's someone here that's terrified of snakes, if I asked them to really, okay, when did that start? What thing justified a lifelong fear of snakes? There's nothing. It might be you saw one when you were a kid and you were scared. if you pay attention to it, it's the parents that are really scared. So it's something you can pass on to your kids, and I'll get into that a little later. But
I think the snakes are great, especially the rattlesnakes. I almost walked into one a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But it warned me, it shook, and it was communicating with me.
Yeah.
There was no question about it.
It says, hey,
Yes.
don't come over here,
That's
don't want
right.
to do this.
So I was able at the last minute to turn away. It was dark, you know, it was
Yeah.
in the street.
But I heard some won't be born.
Well, some do, some don't, but
Yeah.
it's all based on the individual, you know, and if they're sleeping, then they won't. If they're not worried about you, then they won't. If they feel like you're a threat, they'll warn you,
Yeah.
you know, so.
I think it's great to communicate with you, so.
Oh yeah, it's great. I was when there's no rattlesnakes where I was just at, and I was just like, oh, no one's gonna tell me if I'm getting close, you know. A lot of it is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a really easy bias to see in any everyday life. Everyone has this happen. So these are TV shows. This is where snakes usually how they appear in shows like this. We know this stuff is stupid, right? This is not reality. But if you are not around snakes and don't have something to compare it to in real life, this stuff builds up and creates a context. If you are scared of snakes or learn that you're supposed to be scared of snakes, having a snake over there rattling at you is not seen as communication, it's seen as aggression or something, because you're scared of snakes, they're supposed to be scary. You see a snake, your memory is imprinting something, the perception is different than would be if you didn't have that. It's an easier way to show that is if you're looking for a new car or shopping for a new car, or just have bought one, suddenly that car is the most common car on the road. You see it everywhere. It's not because everyone bought the same car, it's because your mind is choosing different information to hold in the forefront and make your decisions of what you're seeing. So stupid stuff can influence your perceptions and your memories. If you are scared of snakes, you're more likely to have a scary experience with them. A thing we say a lot is that rattlesnakes only chase people that are scared of rattlesnakes. You know, and that's true. I've never been chased by a rattlesnake. I'm not scared of rattlesnakes. People who are very scared of snakes are chased by every rattlesnake they see. It's not that rattlesnakes can tell that, it's a perception. Another one is the media. I'm on the news a lot. It's very easy. It's great as a small business owner to be on the news as much as we are, and we don't have to email them anything. It's just snakes, slow news day, throw a rattlesnake in there, you're gonna have a bunch of people arguing. Fun ones are, this one over here, that's in Southern California. Every year they run the story that drought might be causing higher rates of snake bites in Southern California. Every year they run the same story. The numbers are all the same, except for last year when it had record flooding and all that. So then they just changed it to record rainfall causing more rattlesnake bites than ever. Our version of that locally is that rattlesnakes are coming out early. And every year in the same week, they run a story saying rattlesnakes are coming out earlier this year than ever, which mathematically you can't do, you know, but people are doing that. And then this is one that the facts are right, but the story is wrong, right? This is a story about a little girl in Southern California playing in her backyard. She stepped on a baby rattlesnake. It hurt her, scary, went to the hospital, she survived. A lot of lessons there, but this story is about even though they got the dates and times and species right, this story is about a rattlesnake that stalked and attacked a little girl. So it's just nonsensical. So again, this is the bulk of media. I've never been not misquoted in an article. And those are things that also can change your perception about snakes too. And mostly it's just people that we know. It's just guys that are outside doing stuff in the desert. We all know that guy that's seen Bigfoot a bunch of times and has caught the biggest fish in the world, but no one's going to believe him because he got away. And every time they go outside, they have these crazy adventures. We all know that personality type. You know, we might be that personality type. Those people create stories about snakes, that they see a rattlesnake, but by the time they get home, it was much larger than it was, and it did different things than it would do. It jumped in the handlebars of a car, something like that. I hear all that stuff because I'll set up a booth somewhere, and people want to come and tell me stories that I know didn't happen, and I know they know it didn't happen. You know, but these are the things that are memorable. They make really good stories to see a rattlesnake. So it makes the job of telling factual information about that difficult sometimes, because I'm not just saying, here's some facts. I'm saying, hey, your grandpa's lying. Your uncle, his favorite story, he's full of it. And you did not see a 12-foot rattlesnake. I know it. We have to deal with that now. But it's very complicated. You have all this misinformation out there. If it were another topic, if it were, you know, citrus trees, people would not care. If you learn something new, they very quickly abandon those ideas. But if it's snakes or spiders or something that's interesting like that, people hold on to those beliefs. Brown recluse bites is another one of those. I don't work with spiders, but the number of people that believe that brown recluse bites, including doctors, the number of misdiagnosed brown recluse spider bites in the country is ridiculous. They don't live in Arizona. We have a species that's similar to it, but they're MRSA infections. And so if you actually look up spider bites online, you see enough stuff on there to confirm that this thing on your arm or leg is a spider bite, and the doctors also look at information. There's enough misinformation out there that if you look up spider bite, there's a whole bunch of MRSA infections that show up there. And when you look into the data behind that, it's just interesting how that rolls out, is that there's a mythological ailment, and rattlesnake behavior is very similar to a lot of that. So the best thing to kind of go through the facts about rattlesnakes and why it's not something to worry about that much, and to inform. Does everyone here work with residents directly, occasionally, I assume? Best way to answer some of those questions that make people calm down. I mean, that's the goal of this, is that if they're a community where there are lots of rattlesnakes, it doesn't mean that community is dangerous or should be avoided, or the people should be living there in fear or having heightened anxiety even. It's just something else that's good to know about. So I'll go through some of the myths that I hear all the time, the plausible ones that a lot of people tend to probably believe, and if you have anything in that can help better address those questions for people and calm down, make their lives a little better begin. So the first myth is just the perception of rattlesnake attack. Rattlesnakes are not aggressive animals. People ask me that quite often, if I had them here, which of these is the most aggressive, which ones get you and chase you. This is what people think hiking in Arizona looks like. Okay? You're walking down a trail and a rattlesnake jumps out of nowhere and comes after you or bites you for no reason. You know, they have no motivation to do that. I'm around rattlesnakes all the time. I've never once been chased by a rattlesnake. I can reproduce situations where a rattlesnake comes towards me. Like if I'm standing in front of its bush and I'm disturbed, it might try to get to it through me. Or sometimes if you're out in the open, it doesn't understand what a person is. We have no evolutionary history. So it'll try to hide under you in the closest shade that it can see, and that's the shadow that you're casting. And I can reproduce these in a lot of ways. So yes, rattlesnakes might approach somebody, but they're not aggressively chasing people. This video is a good example of that, and I didn't cherry pick this. If you want to see the greatest example of human stupidity in existence, go to YouTube and type in rattlesnake. You're going to see a lot of this, where there is a human dimension here. This interaction has nothing to do with the snake, it has to do with the guy in the camera. And you see that a lot, where rattlesnakes and other things that carry that kind of weight, that perception of social benefit, if you are overcoming it or dealing with it in a certain way. There's a lot of dopamine flowing into this guy right now for reasons that have nothing to do with that snake. If snakes were aggressive, it would just kill that dude, right? It would just get it over with. I would be dead many times over by now. But this is a rattlesnake in a defensive display saying, don't come closer, the guy's not coming closer. But if he were to get closer and he's bitten by it, it would go down as a rattlesnake attack. You know, this rattlesnake attacked this guy, he would probably, the camera's there, but his excuse would probably not be that I was putting my face in a snake's face for no reason, and then it was common, I guess. But this is very common behavior, mostly men. It's mostly men that do this, mostly in groups. There's a group dynamic that happens, a lot of the kind of crowd dynamic things are amplified when a snake is there. We have one guy that's hiking, sees a snake, another person shows up, then they're a little closer. 2 more people show up, there's some sticks involved. By the time there's 10 people, there's pebbles and someone's picking it up by the head and there's a helicopter on the way. So social benefit has a lot to do with the problems that rattlesnakes have. People that just see rattlesnakes and go away from them are almost never bitten. It's not something that's that big of a concern. Another one is this statement. I see that on Facebook a lot. But it showed its fangs and was ready to lunge. When this is kind of the response to, oh, it's a rattlesnake, it's curled over there, don't worry about it. This indicates a lot of things, but most of the time it says that they're not looking at a rattlesnake. This thing is a gopher snake. And they're very common in all the communities outside Phoenix, actually all the way into downtown. Really common snakes that open their mouth as part of a defensive display. So if someone says that a rattlesnake opened its mouth, it wasn't a rattlesnake. They don't do that. There's one subspecies in the central Mexican plateau that very few people have ever seen that does that. I don't think that's living in Mesa. So if it does that, but also people see what they want to see too, because I've been surprised sometimes when people say that this is what's happening, and they go out there and it is a rattlesnake. And they've imagined what it's doing. They're also describing other things that didn't happen. So there are parts of our brains that take over when you are scared of things and can see things. But you can't blame somebody if they move here from somewhere else and haven't seen a snake before, or apparently if you've lived here your entire life and have never seen a snake before. That this would look like a rattlesnake. It's rattling its tail, it makes sounds, it's hissing, it's striking, it's flattening its head. It's not actually mimicking rattlesnakes. They just do similar things convergently. So this could look like a very scary thing, but this is the most common non-venomous snake that you get in all the communities and backyards, especially around like Paradise Valley and Scottsdale and inner city areas where rattlesnakes don't live. They're very, very common in those areas, and they get pretty big too, 6 or 7 feet long. This is a common myth that baby rattlesnakes are worse than the adults. Has everyone heard that? And this one's tricky because you can do all your homework. You could have heard this myth from a ranger at a nature center or on Discovery Channel, National Geographic. I've seen it all over the place. It's just not true at all. So there's a couple of reasons why people think. So this is mother rattlesnake with a bunch of babies that somebody got out of someone's house. First reason that people think that they're worse is that they have a lot more toxic venom. This one's tricky because it's kind of true. Some baby rattlesnakes have a little bit more venom or toxic venom than adults, but it's not much. It's just a little bit just because they're smaller, so they have fewer prey options. There's a whole thing behind it, but it's not much. So the difference, I make this metaphor of a shot of whiskey or a gallon of wine. Right? The toxicity between these things is very different. If you have a shot of whiskey, you're fine. If you drink a gallon of wine, you're not feeling great. You're making tacos and making weird stuff. So the difference is not that much, right, between them. So something to worry about. And the other one that people say the most, and this is also the case with scorpions. There's another myth with scorpions that's similar, that they're worse, is that the babies don't know enough to control the amount of venom, so they always give you all that they have. And I do have a lot of research papers on here. I'm not expecting you to read that stuff. Part of that is just so that you know that I'm not just saying a lot of this stuff because I like snakes and don't want people to kill them and be scared of them, but it's also, everything I'm saying is backed in a lot of research, and if anybody ever wants to see some of it, just grab my email. I'd be happy to send you a collection of papers that would base this on. But baby rattlesnakes have just as much control as the adults do. It's tested over and over again. Baby rattlesnakes can control their venom expenditure very finely depending on what they're doing. So adult rattlesnake is always much more dangerous than a baby. If you step on a 4-foot diamondback, it can do a lot of stuff, has big long fangs, and can give you a lot of venom. A baby rattlesnake that's 10 inches long, you would just get squished, right? So not as much venom, smaller fangs, not as dangerous. And then if you look at these snakes that actually cause fatalities, the rare and few ones that happen, it's almost always adult snakes that give you a lot of venom. So total myth. This one we get with homeowners quite a bit. How to keep them away from homes. And there's a lot of stuff. These snake repellents that you can buy, none of them work at all. And you can't always blame the pest control guy because they don't do the research. They're told also that it works too. But some of the other ones I talk to, they know it doesn't work and say, yeah, but our customers ask for it, so we sell it to them, which, I wish I had, I would sell it all day, it would be great, but it doesn't work at all. We know that because we have a lot of records on this stuff and keep track of it, and we see no difference between yards that are treated with it and not. And then we also see snakes like laying in the stuff. This is a diamondback sitting with mop balls. This is a snake crossing some rope. This is an unposed photo of a guy that spent several $100s of this stuff in Scottsdale, laid it all around his yard, and he bought so much of it as a 2-day job. So he had all the empty bags and the new ones stuffed in the back corner. Overnight, the snake moved in to it. He sort of pulled a backpack and got this. This is also why I'm banned from the Snake Away Facebook page. This photo right here. So I've seen them sleeping on top of it. I've seen rattlesnakes sleeping inside empty bags of Snake Away. We're doing some research right now where we have an experiment designed to do some other testing with other chemicals. We really want this. We want a chemical solution to it. It makes it really good. But right now there's nothing on the market that actually works. I wish it did, but it just makes yards smell bad and waste money. So this is a common one that we get with communities every year about rattlesnake eggs. And this is another one that has to do with social perceptions and benefit, is that When fear exists, it changes your logical order of operations to assume the worst and kind of chip away from there, right? So it's, if any of you work in communities where there's bobcats or mountain lions, that's the reason why every dog print is a mountain lion until somebody can convince them that it's not, is that there's something, you know, I don't know what this is, so it's probably a mountain lion, I need to fear for my life until, you know, and some people will never believe that it's not. But rattlesnake eggs are the same way. The rattlesnakes do not lay eggs, they never do. They give live birth to their young, they take care of the babies for a certain amount of time. There's a really complex social interaction that happens for a while. This is a mother Arizona originals rattlesnake with some of her babies at a site that I watch. She goes and gives birth there every 2 years. It's pretty cool, but they never ever lay eggs. These are quail eggs. So every April, we get hundreds of calls for people saying, help, there are rattlesnake eggs in our backyard, come and get the rattlesnake eggs. And I'll tell them, don't worry, they're not rattlesnake eggs. And then the conversation kind of goes from there. Well, you haven't seen them, how do you know? Because they just don't. Well, maybe this one time, you know. So they don't know what these eggs are and skip over all the birds that they see and all the lizards and everything and goes, it's definitely a rattlesnake. And you can't convince me otherwise because it's unknown. That has nothing to do with snakes, that's a perception. So when you're talking to people about how to not fear snakes, it's fearing snakes when I'm not talking about like just not liking them. I mean, when people are making decisions, life decisions based on their snakes, or they saw a snake crossing the road, so now they're uncomfortable living in their own home, doing a lot of countermeasures against a threat that's mostly in their head. It's hard because you can't just give them facts. You really have to address it. So when we have these, it's a good learning experience for us because we're talking to homeowners, and you can't handle it with just giving them facts. So somebody that's very scared of snakes and sees these rattlesnake eggs in their backyard, if I tell them that they're not rattlesnake eggs and I'm sure of it, their day is still ruined. They're still terrified of it and it's still really complicated. So it's something to keep in mind, is that you're talking to an emotion, you're not talking about facts. If you tell someone that's very scared of snakes, don't worry, snakes are not going to attack you, it does very little to dispel that belief when they're actually out on a trail or something like that. So just good things to keep in mind when you're talking to people. Acknowledge their emotional sense on it. I still go get them if I feel like they're going to squish them up because my Gila monsters love quail eggs. So this little dude is called a night snake. It's the most squished snake in Phoenix. It lives in garages. It lives underneath every house in the outer valley. They eat scorpions, they eat bugs, they eat other snakes, they eat lizards, stuff like that. They get about a foot long. But people think that they're baby rattlesnakes because they're venomous. They have a triangular head. A lot of snakes are venomous. Garter snakes are venomous, but they don't have venoms that hurt people. So they're not dangerously venomous. But if you're a lizard, you're toast if this thing bites you. They don't have rattles in their tails though. So when people see a snake and it has a pointed tail, again, that logical operation change happens to where they'll think, well, it's definitely a rattlesnake. I know that. It just is too young to have a rattle yet. And it's a big baby. It's a 4.5 foot long baby snake. And I know that because it doesn't have a rattle yet, right? Rattlesnakes are born with a rattle. These are speckled rattlesnakes. 3 hours after they're born, you can see very clearly on the end of each tail there is a little bump. It's never pointed, even if it's born deformed or something. The complicated part, the mechanisms to form a pointed tail, is very complicated. It's not like if something's born without a tail, it just turns into a fine point. It's a very specific thing. There are places in the world where rattlesnakes are being born without rattles that function, but they're still born with that last segment. They're just malformed, so as they grow, the new segments just kind of fall off. But that's not in Arizona. Diamondbacks, which are the most common snakes that people see here, it's even easier because they have a really black and white striped tail. I put some identification cards out there so you can see them on there, but it's bright yellow. The rattle stands out and they'll hold it up. They'll shake it even though it's not going to make any sound for a few days yet. But yeah, snake with that pointed tail is not a rattlesnake. So if you're talking to people, if they want to have them send you a picture or something like that, night snakes get caught in glue traps a lot too. So someone says that they have a rattlesnake in their garage, you can look at the tail. If it's pointed, nothing to worry about. Snake bite kits, I don't know if anyone has those in your hiking kit. I know some people do keep them at home in case stuff happens. but they don't work at all. They actually make bites worse. So if you have one, get rid of it. A rattlesnake bite is a very serious situation. It causes massive tissue damage, a lot of necrotic death, and if you put a big bruise on top of that, it actually accelerates that and can take something that wouldn't even leave a scar, make it something that you might lose your limb. So again, a thing that shows up in media quite a bit. Just, what if you've been bitten by a rattlesnake? You suck the venom out, cut it and bleed it out. All those things are archaic methods that don't really help anything. They actually just make it much worse. If you look up rattlesnake bite on Google and see all the pictures on there, I think a lot of people have probably seen those where it's just like someone's arm, it just looks like muscle, they're taking all the skin off of it. That is not what a rattlesnake bite does. It's not what a rattlesnake bite looks like at all. That is old treatment of rattlesnakes called a fasciotomy, where they are worried about compartment syndrome, so they just take all the skin off so it doesn't swell. It actually caused more deaths because of subsequent infections from it. So the treatments itself, when they're bad treatments, can make it worse. And then if someone is killed because of bad treatment from a rattlesnake bite, it goes to the tally of the CDC of rattlesnake-related illnesses. Included in that are people that have a heart attack after they've been bitten by a rattlesnake, because it's the thing that facilitates that eventually, but it's not the cause of death. So it's very complicated to really see what types of, there is a lot of danger there, but a lot of it's treated in other ways. If someone is bitten by a rattlesnake, the only thing that they should be doing is calling 911. That's it. There's no self-help. There's no treatment for it that you can do yourself. You don't tie it off. There's nothing you can do. It's something that a lot of people have a hard time with, that there's not a first aid for it. But if you were, to take a syringe full of bleach and inject it into your stomach, right? You wouldn't hope to have something that you can rub it or something and have it go away. You've been poisoned. You need to go get something that counteracts that poison, and that's what a rattlesnake envenomation is. You need to get to the hospital. They'll treat you with antivenom, and you'll be fine. People don't die in Arizona from rattlesnake bites. It's something that, even though we have more than anywhere, we actually have relatively fewer bites, because a lot of people, we don't have a culture around being stupid with them. Some places that have even fewer rattlesnakes have a lot more bites and a lot more fatalities, because the culture says that every time you see a snake, you need to do something about it. You see a snake crawling over there, you have to shoot it, you have to go pick it up, or you have to move it, or you have to take care of something. And those places usually have a lot more bites, a lot more fatalities than places where you have a lot of people moving from colder environments that don't have a lot of rattlesnake experience, that if they see a snake, they're like, okay, I'm not getting near that. That's the safest thing you can do. If I'm standing right here and there's a rattlesnake right there, the only thing that's going to do anything is to take a step away from it. Shooting at it's not going to help you, because you can just take a step away from it. It's not going to come towards you. It's a lot of stuff that doesn't feel like it's doing anything, but really the most rational and safe way to handle any of this stuff is just to do the boring thing. Walk away from it, call 911 if something happens, that kind of stuff. If you do have a snake bite kit, though, this video is not going to work. It's a video of me throwing it in the garbage, which is better with hiking groups. So this is a new myth. Has anyone heard this one yet? That rattlesnakes are evolving to rattle less or lose their rattles? Yeah, that one's kind of fun, because I get to watch it grow and get new heads and move around the country. There's a guy in South Dakota that I know, and I'm not happy with him right now, because he kind of made this up. The idea was formed in Texas, is where it was originated, that they said that rattlesnakes, when hunters or hogs kill them, they lose their ability to rattle, because they lose they're passing their genes on. So a quiet rattlesnake survives and has more babies. It makes sense, right? That's something that's plausible. But the problem is that this is happening much too fast for evolution to actually be doing that. It's showing up where people are reporting it all over the country. So this would have to happen within 5 years at a whole bunch of different sites around the country, all at the same time, starting at exactly the same time. Also, there's no evidence for it. So I guess that's the biggest one, is that it's actually, there's no data that suggests this is happening at all. And it all comes down to this one NPR story is the one that legitimized it, because they didn't give it a national stage. So instead of talking to a herpetologist or talking to a university or someone that actually works with rattlesnakes, they talk to a guy that runs a pet store. He's like, yep, that's happening. So they run with it, and now it's a national fact. And I see it everywhere. Rattlesnakes rattle if they feel threatened by you. That's it. Sometimes there's a stress response hormone that they have that when it's elevated, it's a higher baseline, so it takes more for them to rattle. And that's the same as any other animal. So in the city park where I'm working with rattlesnakes right now, in our research, we see a lot of rattlesnakes that don't really rattle at mountain bikers. If you're sitting right next to the trail as the mountain bikes roll past and they're not rattling anything. And it's not because they've evolved to not rattle. It's because they have seen a lot of mountain bikes and they're not worried about it. If you take that snake and put it somewhere else for a while and bring it back, it'll start doing it. But snakes in my captive room, most of them don't rattle at me anymore. It's not an evolutionary thing, it's a learned behavior. So for homeowners, this translates mostly for the snowbirds. So they'll have a home, and there's lots of rattlesnakes there, and then they leave for the hot months and then come back in the fall, and help me, there's rattlesnakes everywhere. When we investigate, we find the rattlesnakes have always been there. They have left. So something as simple as a car coming and going from a driveway every day will keep rattlesnakes suppressed. So they make smaller movements, they hide more, they are less present, they rattle less often, things like that. But the idea that rattlesnakes are becoming more silent and becoming more aggressive and all that, it's completely false. Rattlesnakes rattle. It's really a very polite thing, actually. So this one, a lot of this stuff is kind of trivia, right? These are not things that anyone's going to ask you specifically a lot of this stuff. But it can help when you're just kind of addressing someone's overall fear to understand that the thing that they're really scared of is in their head. It's the idea of a rattlesnake. It's not what an experience that they had with a rattlesnake or what a rattlesnake can actually do. It is this idea of this predator that's out there that can hurt you and kill you. A lot of this comes from these types of pictures I see on social media a lot. Again, there's a social benefit to these rattlesnakes in these situations. These are all eastern diamondback rattlesnakes. They're all good sized, but these keep showing up in news stories around the country from places that eastern diamondbacks don't live. I think this last time I saw it was in Montana, where this picture came out. And I don't mean like these snakes, I mean these specific pictures. So local newspaper takes that picture, 10-foot long rattlesnake caught in South Dakota. And then the same exact picture in Oregon 3 months later, 15-foot rattlesnake shot by fishermen in the Columbia River. People just make it up. It's weird. I mean, that's something about the media, right? But it was fact checking. If someone says that they had that experience and they don't, or sticking to it and they have a photograph, there's some level of fact checking that's not done. So it creates this perception that rattlesnakes that are very large live everywhere. And we're also just not good at telling the size of things. So this snake out here is maybe 4.5 feet long. This is a really big snake here. It's probably 4 feet long. This one was measured. It's very big. It was just over 6 feet long. So that's a massive rattlesnake. But this one was last reported at 15 feet long and 197 pounds. So, try to take a 15-foot pole, which is what this pole was. He's holding it from far away. That's 1 inch in diameter, and stand there and try to lift 197 pounds. And then imagine you're the reporter that didn't figure that out and just ran with it anyway. We are not good at telling the size of things, especially if it's something that's interesting. It's an old fisherman trick called forced perspective. There's a reason why people hold fish like this for pictures. It's not because this is the most comfortable way to hold a fish. And on those last ones, a lot of people don't pick that out as the obvious thing just because of the topic. The topic is such a commander of attention that you overlook things like that. If I were to hold my cell phone close to you, and someone took a picture of it, you would not be like, why is that guy carrying around a 2.5-foot phone? Well, he's holding it close to you. So snakes have, even in situations like that where it's obvious what's happening, the subject matter can alter your perception even in that. So if you saw that and you weren't thinking about forced perspective or that they were closer to the camera, it's a very good example of how the subject matter itself will change your logical approach to a situation. So people can have experiences. I'll say one more thing before we do that, but fear and memory and misjudging our own ability and a little thing called Dunning-Kruger syndrome, which is where people you don't know enough to know what you know, right? There's a thing, if you have a friend that's an artist and they're not really that good of an artist, but no one wants to tell them and support their dreams, the reason for that a lot of times is because they don't know enough they don't have enough talent to know that they're not talented. It's a common thing out there. Dunning-Kruger's are really fun. The opposite is imposter syndrome, where we have really incredibly talented scientists and artists and musicians that always feel inferior when they're making incredible stuff. There's a disconnect there. But when we tested people on their ability to judge the size of snakes, And we did this by having a snake in a box and having hundreds of people come through and how big is this snake? I'm not gonna check later, you're gonna have to put your name on it, just how big is it? People were holding up dollar bills, they were using tools to measure it, do a lot of stuff. It was a 46-inch snake, so it's a big snake, 2 inches shy of 4 feet long. And we got guesses between 18 inches and 20 feet in that. And you would think that those are throwaways, that people's kidding. No, we had all the sizes to represent in between. And we have a lot of conversations with people. Yeah, I saw rattlesnakes about 5 feet long. You know, people just are not as good at telling the size of things, especially if it's something you're scared of, especially if there's some unknown social benefit to being a larger thing. You know, if tomorrow I called you and I asked, how long is this table? You know, how many people are actually gonna get that thing to within 2 feet of it being correct? If there's something like if there's some kind of social benefit that you're not even aware of, that says that if this table's larger, it's more interesting and your story's better when you tell people about it, you'll skew large on it, and that's what people do. So all those things together, especially when you're scared, I put that up there, it's another example of forced perspective. When they build the sets for Lord of the Rings, they just make so the little guys are further away from the big guys. When you're scared of something, you can also have a warped perception to where it'll look larger, faster, and be closing distance longer than other things. It works with spiders, works with snakes, works with a number of other things. So somebody can tell me that they saw an 8-foot rattlesnake that chased them, and they may have that memory, actually have experienced that, and it also did not happen. So it's a very complicated thing to address with people because you have to be open to your own memories can be altered by your perception. Optical illusions, that's a really good and easy way of looking at that. Your brain doesn't show you what's actually real, it shows you what you're supposed to perceive. And when something doesn't make sense, or if there's some other instruction in there other than show me the greatest sense of reality that's here, you can get a mixed perception of it. There's a lot of research out there in psychology in the way that size, time, a number of other things can be altered if you're scared of something. So very well documented. So this is very relevant for homeowners, and it's very complicated, and this is not because I like snakes personally. I've also killed snakes for a number of different things, studies and that kind of thing. So killing snakes in the neighborhood does not make the neighborhood more safe. In fact, it can make a much more dangerous situation for the residents and anyone working there, gardeners, everybody. So the first of that is that little point that I brought up earlier about rattlesnakes learning, right? You have a car coming and going from the driveway. Rattlesnakes have a very complex method of handling stress. And when they're more stressed out, there's a lot of activity going around, they hide, right? So if someone is providing a food source, if they have a bird bath in the backyard, they're keeping the dog food outside, or like one of the community parks I see all the time where you have, it's like a park open to the desert and there's those drip systems all the way around the outside on saguaro and Palo Verde that don't need it. It's creating a resource. So if you kill every snake that you see as they come in, you kind of have the choice between snakes that know that people live there and know what time of day the dog comes and goes to the bathroom and knows when the cars are coming, and snakes that don't. And you really have to be focusing on what's bringing the snakes in. So snakes are going to be there. If you kill the ones that you see, then you have this kind of rolling conflict that's happening where the snakes actually never learn to avoid you because you have a new crop of ignorant snakes as they go. And then by that interaction, you enter the highest bracket of rattlesnake bite victims that there is. Okay. This is just a random screenshot that I took off Wikipedia on the day that I made this presentation. If you were to pull it up today, it would be pretty similar, but it tells the point pretty well. I'll just read the first section of all these. While camping at this park, Levins walked outside, saw a snake, brought to his son's attention. When he picked it up, snake bit. This next guy, Hughes, was bitten on the right hand at a service at his church in Kentucky. Isn't that really? Yeah. So it makes sense. So he died that way. His dad died that way. His brother is not dead yet, but I saw a YouTube video 2 months ago of blood shooting out of his ears because he got bit in the face by a timber rattlesnake. So that family doesn't learn. But yeah, this guy was bitten on thigh while handling a timber rattlesnake in West Virginia, so I guess they probably don't have that law. Westbrook was bitten above the right elbow while handling a copperhead. This guy, he was crossing a stream and was fishing and got bit by a rattlesnake and killed him. So the point is not that rattlesnakes are not dangerous. There's definitely a danger that's posed by stepping on a rattlesnake. That's a bad situation. but you don't need to you don't have to walk into it, you know. If there was a guy walking down the street and he was carrying a machete, your first instinct is not to run up and punch him, you know. It's to go tell somebody, or like leave him alone, or hide from him, or something. When someone sees a rattlesnake, their first instinct is to go and shoot it, pick it up, do something about it, and it's not really warranted. And in many cases, it actually creates a much more situation. A lot of that's that Dunning-Kruger good thing again too. A lot of people grew up watching the crocodile hunter pick up rattlesnakes by the head, and then they feel that they can do that as well. And my line of work, that's a big problem too, because you have a lot of people that are young that see, well, I saw someone pick that up, I know how to do that. And people just free-handle rattlesnakes and do a bunch of stupid stuff with them. But again, there's some kind of social benefit to that too. You see a rattlesnake out there, walking away doesn't give you a good story. It doesn't make you feel, you know, you're not able to appear courageous or brave, or that you can handle things if you just leave it alone. Whereas doing something about it does provide that. So there's a lot of things that we're not aware of. When you look at the math of it, it starts looking very apparent. And in the last 10 years, in the United States, there have been 25 snake-related deaths. That includes people that have pet cobras, includes people that are in my line of work that handle them a lot and are bitten by them. The number one reason of that is handling. So handling rattlesnakes is not most bites, but the largest single cause of it is handling. And only one bite death at a residence in 15 years, and you can guess how that happened. The guy saw a rattlesnake. He shot at the snake and went in a shed, and it was bitten when he reached for it. Interesting statistic about shooting snakes: there are more people in the United States that are killed by other people that are shooting at them or shooting at a snake. So more people killed by gunfire that errantly hits them while someone's shooting at a snake than snakes killed. Right? And that's the culture that we have of snakes. It's like winning the lottery, especially in Arizona. The last person that was killed by a rattlesnake in Arizona was a woman in Paulden in 2014. She was bitten by a Mojave rattlesnake and then had a heart attack. There have been a couple of people that were in the news in the last few years in Colorado that were marathon runners that were bitten and killed very quickly. They died within minutes. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, if you're an ultra marathon runner, if you have zero body fat and have a very low resting heart rate, there's something about that causes that death to happen very quickly. I'm not an ultra marathon runner. That's why I tell my wife this is just making sure that I'm safe out there. You know? But there's something to, so for the most part, rattlesnakes are not causing a significant danger out there. You know, and it's easy to say that anytime someone throws out anything, so we'll look at car crashes or something like that. But with the case of rattlesnakes, this is such a small number. It's really not worth, you know, it's worth being cautious. It's worth knowing about it and learning about that and keeping it in mind. It's not worth not going hiking anymore, or selling your house, or not moving to an area that you really want because of that fear. In Arizona, we have around between 150 to 300 bites each year and 0 deaths. And if you remove the people that are playing with them or doing something stupid with it, you have about 75 bites each year. And the place that has more people interacting with more snakes, with higher numbers and the greatest diversity on the continent, we have no deaths and 75 bites. So it's not worth worrying about that much. Again, when you're talking to someone that's really scared of snakes, these are, you know, it's like speaking Greek. It doesn't actually calm that, but these are things you can use to kind of address that emotion of it. These are your typical snake bite victims. I think I put this slide in here in like 2014. Since this guy and this guy both died. This is at a festival in Texas that they put on each year where they use gas and put them in the ground. They get 10,000 rattlesnakes out of it. A bunch of people get bitten in the process. They kill them, and they're doing it for rattlesnake. You know, they said there was an overpopulation, but they've actually extirpated rattlesnakes in the immediate area, and they're having to ship in rattlesnakes from other parts of the state. And as a result, in that part of the country, you have Lyme disease showing up in Texas, which is not really a Western thing you really think about, but there's a Lyme disease problem now in West Texas. Anyone that's been affected by Lyme disease on the East Coast, if anyone knows anybody, the reason for the sudden explosion of Lyme disease in the East was because of the bounty on timber rattlesnakes. Every time they eat a rodent, they also eat 50 ticks. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that create these non-contiguous populations that suddenly can explode. So you get rid of the predators, it causes some splashing. So there's also bubonic plague that's popping up in Texas. Hantavirus is getting out of control. And in the meantime, no one's really being killed by rattlesnakes. So there's really not much benefit to it, but you know, something that people like to do. You And that's something that rattlesnakes certainly can facilitate. So things that are more dangerous than a rattlesnake: falling out of bed. Compare this to 0 to 2 deaths from a snake bite each year. 550, 150 people. I didn't even know that. This is an interesting list when I was looking it up. I was very surprised with this. Champagne corks every new year.
Food for people.
Yeah, compared to 0 to 2 to rattlesnakes. But people are not worried about champagne corks, right? Vending machines, 13 people a year don't look at the sticker that says don't tip it, right? So much more deadly than a rattlesnake. And I'm not kidding. I mean, it's silly, but that's what the math is on it, is that comparatively, a vending machine is a more deadly thing than a rattlesnake. But if someone sees a vending machine, they don't go start hitting it with a shovel or get a shotgun out. See some snacks. They leave it alone. So there's a lot to rattlesnakes that is mostly, it's an emotional thing. And that's the biggest thing, is that like, these are all facts that can help if you're talking to someone who's very scared of snakes, but ultimately you're talking to their emotion. There's an idea. This video is not playing, but 0 people died Christmas shopping this year in the United States, so good job, we're doing it. But Christmas shopping kills more people typically. So in people's communities, a lot of that, if you can ignore all the fear parts of it and the things that make people want to go and interact with those things specifically, a lot of this comes down to prevention. Prevention is the best thing that a person can do in their yard. We have a lot of yards like this in Scottsdale and Cave Creek, where most of this rattlesnake interaction occurs, where we have the homes and a lot of spaces. They maintain natural washes around it, and a lot of, the homes are well placed. And rock piles, things where there's a lot of places they can hide. Lantana is a big one. We're working on a project right now where we're actually taking all the different types of landscaping configurations you can have and comparing them to photographs that we've taken of snakes and see which plant and rock combination, what plant combinations cause the most rattlesnake interactions. And lantana is the big one, because it's big, it's bushy, makes a lot of shade. They tend to be overwatered and poorly maintained. So it's just a great place. Rodents nest in them, but it's also the default plant for any house that's put in. If you want a plant that's always flowering, throw in some lantana. And a little situation like there was rocks, and like that little situation there, I pulled hundreds and hundreds of rattlesnakes and stuff like that. So in my yard, I would never have it, because it'd be, doing the right type of landscaping really matters in those cases. You want places that are not useful to animals. If someone's feeding the rabbits in these communities, if someone has a bird bath out or a bird block or something, you do not want them to have that. That brings in prey items. That can take a rattlesnake that's crawling way off out of the community, and if there's a rat coming and going every day from someone's yard to eat off the bird block, that snake is going to pick that up and come in and be sitting in ambush at the base of that bird block at some point. So anything that attracts prey items and resources are what brings snakes. Snakes do not just show up for no reason. They show up because they're being fed, they're getting water. Sprinkler systems, if you have any control over some of those things, one of the biggest things that I see are drip systems to nowhere, we call them, where there's a park and it's lined with just a drip system that's installed by default, and all it is a little wet patch on the ground. If a drip system does not have a good purpose, if it's watering a native Palo Verde or saguaro, it should go. The more water that's lined up, people are going to come in and then shelter. Anything that's dead plant material, an easy one that any community can do is the back part of the walls that go around everywhere. Clear that stuff out, especially that first 3 or 4 feet. If it's an open space, there's a lot less utility to it for snakes. If you have an area that has all these things together, which is any house that's on the corner of the block, especially near where there's a park or something, especially near the end of the community, then these things exist and those first houses really get quite a bit. We're working on some maps that can kind of show the way the street dynamic works, which houses people usually get snakes at, which ones don't. And then just things to avoid: leaky hoses, making sure there's no extra water around, any kind of brush or debris that's there long term, especially in the side of the house where there's people store their tile and brick that they didn't get to, construction stuff. Unsealed garages in times like April and October, when snakes are either coming out of their dens and getting out to eat or coming back into them. We want people to have their garage door closed as much as possible. People are very often surprised that their rattlesnakes are in the garage, but they crawl right in because the door is open. Under house access, just, if you look at a yard and walk it, if you look at an area and just think, is this something that would invite a predator in? Places to hide, stuff to eat, stuff to drink. All those things occur, then definitely. And anything you can do to reduce those things at a home can really make a huge difference between whether there's snakes there or not. We do this snake fencing, is everyone familiar with? I think there's a lot of, this is kind of confusing to me when we're working with it because every community seems to have different standards for how all this stuff puts together. However, the unfortunate side of that is that this stuff is kind of, it's an all or nothing kind of thing. If it doesn't work 1%, you've created a 99 effective, proof snake trap. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff in there. We're trying to work with a lot of communities to try to figure out what the right, yeah.
You see you've got the pony wall. What's an ideal height from the ground up on the pony wall before you would start to need that snake prevention?
So 36 inches. So when we do testing with it, a large snake tends to give up when it's crawling up about halfway. If it's crawling up, it goes up about halfway and then stops. If it has something it can rest against, it goes up about 2/3 of the way. A very large snake in Arizona is 4 feet long. So a 4.5 foot long snake, the math works out to about 36 inches above and once and under. If you have something less than that, they get confused by it. They think it's brittle brush. So they go up, they don't try to really go up as a first action, they try to go through it. So we see a lot of is if a fence is too short, a snake manages to get into it, and then in the morning, when it's getting hot, they're panicking, going back and forth, trying to get out, and they can't get through it. So then you create a trap. The other side of that are gates. If someone puts this stuff up all around the house but doesn't do the front gates, the snake might be crawling through and then it's trapped there too. So in circumstances where there's a home that we either through the regulations on what the snake fence is or just the placement, like some places you can't actually do all the way, we just advise that they don't do it at all because having a partial fence on that stuff really causes a lot of problems. So there are aesthetic concerns and that stuff too, but a lot of that stuff that we work with people. A common one is the size of the mesh where you have a 1/4 inch mesh and then there's the 1/2 inch ones. And I see a lot of rules that you need to use the 1/4 inch one because it's less visible. It's actually the other way around because the 1/4 inch is a higher gauge wire. You can see it easier where the shorter stuff, if this were at an angle, it's here too, you just can't see it. So it turns into kind of a mist. So it's stuff like that that's like, it's kind of hard to know without seeing it. So we're trying to talk with everybody as much as you can to try to figure out what those standards are. And then there's other companies that do this stuff too, getting them to kind of adopt it. So we have a standard that's based on an actual science and not kind of what we think snakes do. So in our snake building right now, we have a series of boxes of different heights, and we imported a snake from Texas that's this giant snake. And we're doing a lot of testing to see how much they can climb, what they'll climb through, what they won't, all that stuff. So it's pretty specific stuff.
Is it better outside versus inside?
It's better outside, yeah. So on the outside of these bars, if it's on the inside, then there's a little space where they can push off. There's some stuff there, and that gets kind of tricky because there's painting that happens, So one thing is that we use screws instead of ties. You don't want to use the ties, so even though the screws do cause a hole in the fence in the metal, the ties wear through the paint very quickly and end up causing a replacement. So if something has a hole in it, you can patch that. The ties we've seen cause a higher rate of rust on it. So as soon as that, it wears through the paint really quickly and then it creates much more damage. It also falls apart really easy. So there's lots of little things like that. So if you guys have any notes on what those rules are, we'd be very happy to work with anybody to kind of help figure out some of that stuff and share some of the things that we've learned on it. And again, we're trying to give this to anybody that does this type of work too, because it works great, but it has to be done right, or else you cause problems. And we don't want to cause problems. Yeah, and again, do not use any repellents or mothballs or recommend it to people. That's one of the things we do work with a couple of pest control companies, and that's one of the things we ask them is if they use those. And some people do, some people don't. There's a lot of money in it. And if one does work someday, I'll be super excited because then I'm going to make so much money. But it doesn't work, It's unfortunate. Easy test on any of those snake fences to see if it's going to work or not. If you don't want to eyeball a 1/4 inch, get a big pen, just the regular cheap pen, and try to put it through the mesh. If it goes through it, a baby rattlesnake can get through it. We did testing with that with a newborn sidewinder. Sidewinder is the smallest snake in the state. Got a pregnant one, gave birth, grabbed a brand new newborn baby, and saw what things we could stuff it through. 1/4 inch, too small, 1/2 inch. Just, I mean, it's, you do want just a little bit of space, but it makes a huge difference between the other snake in a yard or not. So,
When you're saying that the 1/2 inch was a thinner gauge than the 1/4 inch?
the 1/2 inch is a thicker gauge wire. The 1/4 inch has more metal, but it's a thinner gauge. So it appears as a mist from a distance of about 10 to 15 feet, where the thick gauge, you tend to always see it. It picks up that shine a lot more. It seems to, so I understand the reasons for that, because there's less metal in there, but in practice, it looks different. And also the 1/2 inch it's not effective. So even if we just wouldn't use it, because we know for a fact it doesn't keep baby snakes out of yards. So, if you guys have any questions or anything about that, if anyone has a resident that has, we don't do any, we're a private business. I don't do a lot of salesy stuff. A lot of it is just talking to people about snakes. That tends to do their job pretty well. Just kind of, there's not a lot of information out there that's factual. We want everyone to feel good about where they're living, and not have to. It just makes me feel a little sad when someone's found a house that they like and then they choose not to live there because they heard someone down the way had a dog bitten by a snake or something like that. It's unfortunate because it shouldn't be that big of a concern, and it's one that's very fixable. So if you guys ever have concerns with that, something else that I do quite a bit is presentation is very similar to this one, but geared more towards homeowners. A lot of the same information, but just kind of packaged a little bit differently. I do give that at community centers wherever I can. You can do that however you want. Some places let me hand out cards. Some prefer I don't. Either way is fine with me. It's just information, gets people feeling good about living where they do, but I'd be happy to schedule with anybody that likes that kind of thing. So that's our info, more information about our research. And even if you're just hiking, see a snake, want to know what it is, you can shoot us an email. Any questions? Yeah.
Is it true that the rattlesnake will jump twice their length?
It is not. It's
No.
about half their body length to 2/3 if they're at an angle or.
So if you run
snake.
into a 4-foot rattlesnake, they'll jump 2 feet?
Yep. And it's a quick jab, so a predatory strike is a different one than a defensive one. Defensive strikes tend to be really short, and they don't really even make contact very often when tested. It's almost like they're flashing the inside of their mouth. Like a cottonmouth is a good example of that. We have a white mouth, rattlesnakes do too. So there's definitely a defensive bite, but it's not like a situation where they're going to go out of their way to bite you. They'll do a lot of things in between, including feigning bites.
Okay, and I guess it's not illegal to kill them?
It is not. It is not. It's illegal to shoot them in town, and that's something that comes up a lot, is snake shot and stuff like that. You can't shoot them in town. And this is not just because I like them. It's that it doesn't solve the problem. So if somebody, if you have garbage and you keep it on your patio and you swat flies as they appear, it may feel like you're doing something. You gotta take out the garbage.
This is a stupid question. Will the king snake eat a rattlesnake?
They will. King
They will.
snakes eat them. Coach whips also eat them. People call them red racers. They'll eat them as well. There's a snake called a long-nosed snake that looks a lot like a king snake. They do not eat them. But everything else eats rattlesnakes: bobcats, hawks, owls, coyotes. That's why
Okay.
they're so jumpy.
So it's good to have a king snake in the barn then?
It is. But they won't stay there. So people ask a lot, they
Yeah.
get a lot of emails, hey, can you bring me a king snake so I can let it go in my yard? I'd say no, because if I do, the king snake's just gonna go right out of the yard. There's an equilibrium that finds itself. So if you have a lot of rattlesnakes in your yard, you're gonna have a lot of king snakes in your yard because they're there to eat, but you're not gonna get a king snake that just hangs out and waits for one to show up. Gopher snakes and bull snakes do not eat rattlesnakes. That's another common one out there, is that they eat them, but they compete with them. So anything that's not venomous is good to have around, just because it might be eating rattlesnake, and I've even seen to where it's just taking up the space. There's one little hole
Yeah.
there, and there's a 5-foot gopher snake sitting there, so there's no room.
I do have a property up in Snowflake, and
Mhm.
there are brown clue spiders there, so.
So it's a different species of them. I'm not an entomologist
Okay.
on it, but they have, when I do talk to entomologist friends, we
Mhm.
trade woes, and that's one of theirs, is that there's such a the information about the Reclusa genus of spiders is so pervasive that the doctors misdiagnose quite a bit. I've had a doctor tell me that I had a brown recluse bite, and I know I didn't because I wasn't even in the United States. I know what it was, and it's interesting because a lot of that stuff, the pictures and all that, and there's a lot of spiders here that do look like that.
Yeah.
And so if you misidentify something so much, you can do your homework. You can go look up pictures
Yeah.
of it, and you see a whole bunch of stuff that's labeled as that, but it's not actually what it is. It's something else that's been.
So there's none in Arizona?
No, there's another member of that genus that also has a bad bite, but it's exceedingly rare. It's not something that really people see. But you can also have a doctor that says you have a spider bite, and they can. So it's kind of complicated. I'm not a doctor, right? So I can't. If the doctor tells you something, definitely listen to it. But I do know from people that are professionals in that line of work that brown recluse bites are major misdiagnosis, and a lot of this is bacteria-resistant infections.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
What temperatures do snakes usually come out at? I mean, is it usually the overnight temperature that you're looking at, or is it?
Yes, it's so what gets snakes moving is a constant temperature. So when snakes start moving out, we're looking for consistent temperatures of several days at around 65 degrees, which is usually about the second week in March, somewhere in there. And then if you have this sawtooth, if you look at the weather forecast, and it's 90 degrees in the daytime and 50 degrees at night, they don't want anything to do with that. They can't do anything. So even if it's really hot, if it's 110 in the daytime and 100 at night, and it's just this little shallow thing, then they start moving. It's predictable. So it's a lot of predictability, but yeah, you're right. Nighttime temperatures are the things that tend to drive both the leaving and coming to the dens. So people are seeing snakes out right now. They're seeing them very occasionally, but they're seeing them at their den sites. So on a good day, they'll come out and just kind of sit at the entrance and then go back. They're not moving around.
One more question.
Sure.
My brother, his dog got bitten by a rattlesnake. He never took it to the vet, and the dog made it okay.
They
Is that
can fight it
common,
off.
or they can fight it off?
They can't. I wouldn't. I mean, it's a big thing that came out last year is people were saying to give your dog Benadryl. Instead, it does not work.
Okay.
The swelling from a rattlesnake bite is not caused by a histamine reaction to it. It's caused by cell death. It's the cells rupturing and a bunch of other problems. So Benadryl is given by the vets a lot of time. And I'm not a vet, I'm not a doctor, so throw this all away if you want. But they do give Benadryl when they're giving antivenom because there sometimes can be a reaction to the antivenom too, foreign bodies in your blood. But if you have a dog and give it Benadryl, it does not stop the degradation of cells. So if you get bit, go to the doctor. What I recommend people do is find a good 24-hour vet ahead of time and have that plan worked out. Get all the billing questions you have done, all that stuff. So if you have an emergency, fastest you get in there. The saying is time is tissue. Fastest you get in it, the faster you can stop it. Same thing for people too. If you get bit by a rattlesnake, only person that should tell you it's a dry bite is the doctor. Just go. So, what was yours? Did you have a question?
I was just going to ask if the snakes always go back to the burrows at night.
No, it depends on which time of year it is too. So they'll have a range with several different areas that they use they'll have a hunting area, they'll have 3 or 4 winter rumination sites, and then a couple of estivation sites. They'll move between them based on who's at the other ones, what they're doing, and their success throughout the year. But so they do have habit. If they know that there's a really good place to spend the winter, they'll go there, and the numbers that use it will go up too. They have success in a place. So I see that at homes where they have good access underneath the house, and you go in there and there's several rattlesnakes using it. It's not that they all found it at once, it's because those rattlesnakes grew up there, and they come back every winter, and every winter they have success. So that's why I wrote an article this morning about that, is that this is the time to do your big landscaping from the year if you're planning on building a new rock pile or doing something, because the rattlesnakes are where they're at. They're not moving around. If someone gets a rattlesnake at their house, it's been there since October. So you're not going to be shaking things up. Right now is the time to do it. And unless they've had success there, then they're not going to do that. And if there is one there right now, and then you remove that stuff, it cancels that success, so they won't return to it. So it's a good time for that.
And how old do they live?
The oldest one's being tracked right now is 56 years old. It's a timber rattlesnake.
Wow.
Most of the time they live a lot left. It's a hard life out there, so if every year you have a 10% chance of getting eaten by a hawk, that means after 10 years you're doing pretty good. Most of the ones that we are tracking are probably in the 5 to 10 year range.
I meant natural death, not.
Yeah, natural death. If they get eaten by, well, they don't get an opportunity to die of old age out there. So, yeah, 5 to 10 years.
But they could live.
They could live a very long time. Yeah.
Wow.
Reptiles have very low metabolisms, and there's a lot of benefits of that. They don't. Rattlesnakes float. They don't drown. I mean, you can drown one, but it takes. Back in the days before scientific ethics, they would just see how many rattlesnakes they could drown, and it takes them like a half hour, 45 minutes to drown. Just because if you're cold-blooded, we're very wasteful as warm-blooded animals. We throw out most of the energy we do at the top of our heads is heat. They can just wait, breathe less, put themselves down a little bit. So they're pretty tough, but they get eaten by things. That's kind of their or exposure if they don't get enough. You're seeing a partial collapse of stuff in the Phoenix parks. For people that are actually working with animals in those areas, climate change is not a theory. It's a thing we can see in our data as we're moving forward. And a lot of the snakes living in the parks in the cities are having a harder time. But otherwise, they live very long lives.
What's your fee?
What's that?
What's your fee?
For removal,
Yeah.
it's between 100 and 140 usually, just depending on availability of an agent. And once the person's there, we'll ask if he wants to look around, so we'll check. See, the thing we're looking at is we don't treat the snake as the problem. The snake is a symptom of the problem. So if you go there, the goal is to go once and then we never have to come back. Catch the snake, oh, it's because of the bird bath. Get rid of this bird bath and you never see a snake. Sometimes we keep going back and they still won't just remove the bird bath, But that's, at that point, I'm off the, ethical hook, I guess, so I can keep doing it. But yeah, every snake is at a place for a reason. Sometimes, if there's an area where there's construction nearby, that's going to cause a higher rate of rattlesnakes, and up to 3 years afterwards. So where the snakes come back. So it's not just snakes that are displaced. There's other snakes that were far away that are coming in, and my home is gone. I have to find another spot in a hurry. So they just pick the closest place they can. So that process lasts about 3 years. So if you're in an area that has a lot of new development that's rolling, every time they break ground, that starts over. So like Peoria, it's just a froth of rattlesnake activity that's getting people's yards and stuff. So it's always interesting, and that's where you get snakes in really surprising places too. Commercial areas, inside of the Target, women's bathroom, good stuff like that. That's not their preferred habitat. That's a snake that's been, the fire department does remove snakes, but it can be really problematic because they take them and they throw them over the fence.
No, they don't.
They don't do it anymore?
No, we've called.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, a lot of the communities where they do that, because if it's really hot, the snake's upper terminal temperature is 105 degrees Fahrenheit.
Mhm.
The ground in the summer is much more than that, at like 8 a.m. So if you take a snake and put it on the hot ground, it panics and crawls to the closest place it can. So it either comes directly back or goes in the neighbor's yard. And it's a very complicated thing. I mean, if you catch them and put them somewhere, make sure to put it in the shade, because then they have time to think about it and reorient. They don't actually like heat. They like the right temperatures. They don't like heat. So, go on. All right, well, if anyone, my card's over there. If you have questions, on the way driving back to your office, you'll think of a couple questions for sure.